I stood by my father's grave, the wind whipping through my coat, but I couldn't feel a thing. Not the cold, not the ache in my feet, just numbness. Numbness and the heavy weight of goodbye. We'd buried him that morning, my father, my rock, the only man who'd ever made me feel truly protected, and as the last shovelful of dirt hit the casket, something inside me cracked. But I didn't cry, not then, because I was too focused on the man standing across from me, the one pretending to grieve. My stepbrother, Mason. We'd never been close, never bonded, not really. When our parents married, I was already 17, quiet, bookish, still raw. From watching my mom die of cancer, Mason was 20, loud, charming, and already trying to prove to everyone he was the smartest guy in the room. We coexisted under the same roof, nothing more. I left for college a year later and only came home. On holidays, our interactions were polite, surface-level, but always laced with something colder. Like, we both knew there was no real love there. Dad tried though. God, he tried. He wanted us to be brothers. He talked about legacy and family unity, more times than I could count. He made sure we were both included in family businesses, both had seats at the table. But I always noticed how Mason treated me like I was the charity case, the soft one, the backup. When Dad got sick, things got complicated. Late-stage pancreatic cancer. 6 brutal months. I flew back and never left his side. Mason showed up, when it was convenient, posing for the nurses, making dramatic speeches, but leaving me to handle the real pain, the meds, the nights, the legal paperwork. Still, I didn't complain. I figured, grief looks different on everyone. I tried to be understanding. Dad always said, protect each other when I'm gone. I held on to that. I should have known better, because less than 48 hours after we put Dad in the ground, Mason called me into the office, the same office my father had built with his bare hands. He sat behind Dad's desk like he'd always belonged there, like he'd been waiting for this. He didn't even look me in the eye. We're restructuring, he said, like this was just business. You're not a fit moving forward. We'll process your severance by the end of the week. I stared at him, frozen. My ears were ringing. You're firing me. It's not personal, he said, shrugging. We just need sharper talent right now, not personal. My father hadn't even been dead 3 full days. I walked out of that office with my fists clenched and my heart shattered. Rage and sorrow collided in my chest. He didn't just fire me. He erased me from our father's legacy, from everything we'd built. But what Mason didn't know, what he had never bothered to find out, was that I wasn't just Dad's quiet son. I was his business partner, his confidant, and the silent owner of the entire building Mason now worked in. And soon, he'd regret forgetting that. After the meeting, I drove around aimlessly for hours. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The house still smelled like Dad's aftershave. His slippers were still by the back door. His coffee mug sat in the sink like he'd be back tomorrow to wash it. I couldn't face it, not yet. So I parked at the beach, sat on the hood of my car with the wind in my face, and stared at the horizon until the sun dipped below it. My phone buzzed a dozen times. Condolences, formalities, a message from HR telling me how to collect my severance package. Cold, efficient, final. That night I drank half a bottle of whiskey and cried in the shower. I didn't cry for the job. I cried for the betrayal, for the way Mason looked at me like I didn't matter, like I'd never mattered. All those years I kept my head down, worked hard, played fair while he charmed his way into Dad's good graces. I thought maybe he'd changed over the years, grown up, maybe he even respected me a little, but he'd been waiting for this, for Dad to be out of the way. And now, the vultures were circling. The next day, I woke up to a flood of emails from old clients. One of them, Mr. Delaney, had worked with me personally for years. His message was short and clipped. Sorry to hear about your departure. Mason informed us you were moving on to new ventures. We'll be finalizing our transition this week. Best of luck. New ventures, I whispered, heart pounding. He was erasing me outside the company now, telling people I chose to leave. I called Mr. Delaney right away. He answered on the second ring. You're not taking on clients anymore. What? No, that's not true, I said quickly. Mason fired me. There was a long pause. Oh, Delaney said, his voice suddenly hesitant. Well, that's different from what we were told. Mason said you'd wanted a clean break, that you felt overwhelmed and needed space. I nearly dropped the phone. That wasn't just business talk. That was character assassination. I wasn't just being removed, I was being rewritten. And then I started to notice more things. I logged into the company's shared project files, something Mason had clearly forgotten to revoke access to. My name had been scrubbed from every joint proposal. Mason Carter appeared solo on projects I had led. Old emails were deleted. My recommendations removed from presentation decks. It was like I never existed. Then came the weird expense logs. Late-night dinners, cash withdrawals, corporate card charges to consultants I'd never heard of. When Dad was alive, we kept everything transparent. Every penny accounted for. Now it was all blurred lines and red flags. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I reached out to Carla, one of the assistants. She'd worked under me for 3 years. Loyal to the bone, I asked her to meet discreetly. We sat in the back corner of a cafe downtown. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. You didn't hear it from me, she whispered. But Mason's different. He's been holding private meetings, locking his office, using burner phones. My heart sank. What for? She shook her head. I don't know, but people are scared. HR's been quietly replacing folks who ask too many questions. And the interns, he's got them signing NDAs. NDAs. What's he hiding? I asked. Almost to myself. Carla leaned in, her eyes darting around. You didn't hear this from me either, but there's talk he's trying to sell part of the company. My blood ran cold. Sell? To who? No one knows. But whatever's going on, it started right before your dad died. That was the final gut punch. My father hadn't been gone 2 weeks, and Mason was already tearing down everything he'd built. The thing is, I didn't need to dig too far to figure out what was happening. Mason had always been reckless, a gambler at heart. He wanted fast wins, flashy clients, big payouts. Dad kept him on a leash, but with Dad gone, Mason was free, and I had a feeling he was burning through company assets to fund some new scheme. The kicker? He didn't even know what I knew. He didn't know Dad quietly transferred the deed of our office building to me in January, sick and scared, but thinking ahead, just in case. Dad had said, Mason's got a big mouth. You've got a quiet spine. If things go wrong, this building stays in the family. Real family. So yeah, he fired me. But the roof over his head, that was mine now. I wasn't sure yet what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for damn sure. Mason had no idea the storm he'd just invited. I didn't sleep much after that meeting with Carla. My mind wouldn't let me. It kept playing over. Every word she said, every name scrubbed from a file, every dollar Mason couldn't explain. For a while, I just stared at the ceiling, wondering how I'd let things get this far. How I'd let Mason take so much from me, from Dad. But sometime around 3 a.m., something in me shifted. I wasn't going to beg for scraps from the table I helped build. I wasn't going to let a greedy, insecure man rewrite my father's legacy. Erase mine. No. If Mason wanted to play games, then I'd play chess. First, I needed proof. I called an old friend from college, Theo, who now worked in corporate security and forensic accounting. The kind of guy who could crack an audit trail blindfolded. We weren't best friends or anything, but we'd stayed in touch. When I explained the situation, he didn't even hesitate. Send me the files, he said. Give me 3 days. So I did. I handed over everything: expense reports, meeting schedules, email trails I'd backed up years ago, even internal chat logs I'd archived before I was locked out. While Theo got to work, I took a different route. I went to see Linda Wu. Linda had been Dad's lawyer for nearly 2 decades, the kind of woman who made CEOs sweat with a single raised eyebrow. She greeted me with a firm handshake and a tighter frown. I figured I'd be seeing you, she said, motioning me into her office. I need to know what protections Dad put in place before he passed. Mason's already tearing things apart. Linda opened a file on her desk, already prepared. Your father was worried this might happen. He didn't trust Mason to manage the business long term. So 6 months ago, while you were helping with his treatments, he updated everything. She handed me a stack of documents. I flipped through them, my heart racing. A revised shareholder agreement, a clause that triggered a financial review upon any change of leadership, and most importantly, a sealed letter addressed to me. I opened it slowly. Dad's handwriting, familiar and steady. Son, if you're reading this, then I'm Gonand. Mason's already shown his true colors. I trust you to do what's right. Don't fight him with anger. Fight him with intelligence. Let the truth be your armor. I didn't realize I was crying until Linda handed me a tissue. Your father gave you the tools, she said softly. Now, you just have to use them. By the time I left Linda's office, I had a plan. Over the next few days, I moved in silence. I didn't confront Mason. I didn't even let on that I was still involved. I let him think he'd won, that I'd slinked off in shame, licking my wounds. But behind the scenes, I was collecting allies. I met with 2 department heads who still respected my work. Quietly, they confirmed what Carla had hinted at: Mason was pressuring the team to inflate earnings forecasts for Q2. One even showed me a revised spreadsheet that someone had edited behind closed doors. Projections tripled with no real basis. Fabrication, plain and simple. Theo got back to me on the 3rd night. Your stepbrother's in deeper than you thought, he said grimly. Shell companies, multiple off-the-books transfers. Some of the consultants are ghost entities, no tax records, no staff. I traced one payment to an account in the Cayman Islands. I felt the air leave my lungs. He's laundering money, looks like it, or preparing to. Either way, it's fraud, and he's using the company to do it. Theo emailed me a full report, meticulously detailed, with screenshots, timestamps, and IP logs. You've got enough here to bury him, he said. But be careful. If he realizes you know, he'll scramble everything. I wasn't ready to bury him. Not yet, because I wanted more than revenge. I wanted justice. I wanted every lie exposed, every client he tricked, every employee he bullied, every backroom deal dragged into the light, and I had the perfect stage to do it. The building. The one asset Mason had overlooked entirely. The one place he still believed was his kingdom. He had no idea that as of Dad's final months, I owned it. The deed sat in a safe deposit box, notarized and legally binding. Mason might have the company name, but I owned the walls, the floors, the plumbing, the power, and he was still signing lease checks every month. Checks addressed to a holding company that funneled directly to me. I started crafting my next move. First, I made copies of every file Theo sent, one for my lawyer, one for the authorities sealed but ready, one to be mailed anonymously to our board of investors the moment I pulled the trigger. Next, I called the building's property management service, my service, and froze all work orders from Mason's office suite. No maintenance, no upgrades, no expansion approvals. Then I updated the terms of his lease to require a 30-day renewal clause, something he hadn't read in the fine print when Dad passed. Finally, I did the most satisfying thing yet. I scheduled an owner's inspection for the end of the week. Mandatory, no exceptions. Mason would have no idea what was coming, but when I walked through those doors next, I wouldn't be a grieving stepson or a discarded employee. I'd be his landlord and the executioner of his house of lies. Friday morning, gray skies, heavy clouds, the kind of day where the air feels thick, like something is about to snap. I wore my best navy suit, Dad's old cufflinks, polished shoes, and the quiet calm of a man who's been underestimated for too long. I walked into the lobby like I owned the place, because I did. The security guard nodded respectfully. "Morning, Mr. Carter." I nodded back. "Let's get started." The inspection team was already upstairs, per my order, checking safety compliance, lease adherence, tenant usage. Just a formality, of course. But I knew what I was really there for. Mason didn't. Not yet. He was in his glass-walled office, feet kicked up on the desk, laughing with one of the interns. He didn't even look up when I walked in. He just pointed toward the door like I was a delivery man. "Leave it with reception." I smiled coldly. "Oh, I plan to." He looked up, blinked once. Confusion, then irritation. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I'm here for the inspection." "Inspection?" He scoffed. "You don't work here, remember?" "I don't, but I own the building. And according to the lease your assistant blindly auto-renewed last quarter, I'm entitled to quarterly inspections. Clause 7, Section 3. His eyes flickered. "You're lying." I pulled the papers from my folder and placed them gently on his desk. "The deed was transferred to me before Dad passed. You've been sending rent checks to my holding company for months. Guess you never bothered to read the fine print." He snatched the paper and scanned it, color draining from his face. "You're bluffing." I leaned in. "Am I?" He stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "This is bullshit. The intern stared at him, wide-eyed. "You think owning some bricks and drywall makes you important?" He hissed. Double quotes. "No. But you know what does?" I placed another folder on his desk. "Theos report. Knowing you've been stealing from your own company, cooking the books, lying to investors. And now I've got proof." His eyes locked onto the top sheet. Bank transfers, ghost invoices, his name on wire authorizations. The whole web, printed in black and white. This isn't save it," I snapped. "The files have already been sent to Linda." "Woo!" "She's initiating emergency arbitration. The board has copies, and by Monday morning, the SEC will too." He sank back into his chair like the weight of it all finally hit him. "You're going to ruin me?" I tilted my head. "You ruin yourself?" "I'm just holding up the mirror." For a moment, he looked lost, not angry, not smug, just small. Like the child he still was, inside a boy trying to wear a man's suit. All bluff, no backbone. Then he lashed out. "Dad wanted me to lead. He said I was the future. He never believed you had what it took." I stepped closer, voice calm but deadly. "No. Dad gave you every chance, and you burned them. You didn't just fire me. You betrayed him. Everything he built. And now, you're going to pay for it." He slammed his fist on the desk. "You think this makes you better than me? No, it just makes me right." Outside the office, the inspection team walked by, clipboard in hand. The head manager gave me a nod. "Inspection complete. Violations noted. We'll follow up with your office next week." I turned back to Mason. "You'll be receiving a notice of lease termination by the end of today. 30 days to vacate." His mouth opened. No sound came out. "You can try to fight it," I added, slipping the last paper from my folder. "But that letter from Dad, the one he left me before he died, it names me as executor of his estate. If you go to court, you'll be fighting his words, not just mine." Mason's hands trembled. I'll go public. Tell everyone, you ambushed me, that you faked this." "Go ahead," I said flatly. "The audit trail is clean. The emails are time-stamped. The law is on my side." Silence stretched between us like a noose. I could see it sinking in. The realization? He wasn't untouchable. Not anymore. I turned to leave, but paused in the doorway. "You know the worst part," I said over my shoulder. "I didn't want it to end like this. I wanted us to be brothers. I really tried. But I shook my head. "You buried me before the dirt on Dad's grave was even dry." He didn't answer, didn't move, just sat there, a broken man in a glass office, watching his empire crumble from the inside out. I walked out of that building with the weight of justice on my shoulders, and the ghost of my father's voice in my ear. Let the truth be your armor. I had, and it was. The fallout came faster than I expected by Monday morning. Mason's face was plastered across every financial news outlet in the region. Local CEO under investigation for fraud. The headlines read, investors pulled out almost instantly. A press release from the board confirmed what the documents had already proved: embezzlement, financial misrepresentation, and multiple breaches of fiduciary duty. They suspended Mason effective immediately, pending a full legal inquiry. He didn't even try to fight it. By Thursday, he'd cleaned out his office, left behind only a broken monitor and a whiskey-stained chair. HR told me he'd handed in his badge with shaking hands and eyes that looked hollow, like something inside him had finally cracked. The company stabilized quicker than I expected. 2 investors were angry. Yes, but they appreciated the transparency. Linda and I worked together with the board to secure interim leadership, and I made it clear I wasn't looking to take Mason's seat. That wasn't what I wanted. Not anymore. I just wanted to make sure no one else got hurt. A week later, I stood alone in the empty top floor of the building, the floor Mason once called his kingdom. The blinds were half open. Sunlight poured through, painting the room in gold. I should have felt triumphant. I'd won. Justice had been served, but all I felt was a strange, aching quiet. I walked over to the window, hands in my pockets, looking down at the city my father loved, the city where he built his dream brick by brick, and even though Mason tried to tear it down, it still stood, stronger than ever, and so did I. The letter Dad had left kept it framed on my desk now. His words were a compass in the storm. Don't fight with anger. Fight with truth. I'd done that, and it had saved us. But there was still grief, still a sting in my chest when I thought about what Mason and I could have had, a real bond, a shared future. He had every chance, and he chose betrayal. That loss didn't go away. Even after the lawsuits were filed and the locks changed, it lived in quiet moments, in the way I still set 2 coffee cups on the table some mornings by mistake, in the silence that filled the room where Dad's voice used to be. But there was something else now. Peace. Not the kind that comes from revenge, but the kind that grows from standing your ground, from protecting what matters, from honoring the people who raised you right. I'd been fired, I'd been betrayed, but I hadn't been broken, and as the sun dipped below the skyline, washing the city in fire and shadow, I finally exhaled. Dad was gone, but his legacy, it was safe. Because I was still here. 3 months later, everything was different. The office building was alive again, buzzing with new tenants, independent startups, and the kind of passionate, hungry people my father used to say reminded him of his younger self. We converted Mason's old executive suite into a co-working hub for small businesses. It felt poetic, almost transforming the space he used to hoard into something open and full of energy. I wasn't running the company, but I was deeply involved. I took on an advisory role, working with the board to restructure policies, implement new oversight, and rebuild trust. We launched a mentorship program in Dad's name, offering support to young professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. I could almost hear him chuckling, saying, "Now that's how you make your name mean something." I also took time for myself, something I hadn't done in years. I traveled for the first time since college, visited places Dad used to talk about but never got around to seeing: Rome, Lisbon, Kyoto. I stood in cathedrals older than our country and watched the sun set over cities that knew centuries of pain and still thrived. It reminded me that loss doesn't mean the end. It just means the beginning of something different. Therapy helped too. I had to face a lot, not just Mason's betrayal, but my own habit of staying silent, of keeping my head down to avoid conflict. I realized that being the quiet one wasn't weakness, it was just how I survived. But now, I didn't need to survive. I was allowed to live. Emotionally, I was still healing. Some nights I'd wake up expecting to hear Dad in the kitchen, humming and making tea. Some part of me still ached when I saw a pair of brothers laughing on the street or a father and son tossing a football in the park. That longing didn't just disappear, but I wasn't stuck in the pain anymore. I'd found something stronger on the other side of it. Clarity, and with it came purpose. I started volunteering at a local youth entrepreneurship center, teaching kids how to build business plans, how to spot fraud, how to protect their ideas. I told them stories, some real, some cautionary, all true in spirit. I wanted them to understand that integrity was more valuable than 1,000 quick wins. That quiet strength was still strength. As for Mason, the legal process was ongoing. He was under federal investigation, and while he hadn't been arrested yet, the mountain of evidence was growing. Last I heard, he'd moved back in with his our mother, for a brief, awkward stretch of years and was avoiding reporters. Part of me hoped he'd find his way back, that he'd grow, that he'd finally confront whatever made him choose greed over love. But that was no longer my burden to carry. I'd done what I needed to do, and I had peace with that now. When I walk through the building, I walk with my head held high. People greet me with respect, not because of what I own, but because of how I stood when things got hard. I didn't burn it all down. I rebuilt. Not just a company, not just a name, but myself. And for the first time in a long, long while, I could finally sigh. I was proud of who I'd become. Looking back now, I realize betrayal doesn't always come with flashing warning signs. Sometimes, it wears the face of family. Sometimes it waits until the world is already crumbling beneath your feet to show its true nature. But betrayal isn't the end. It's a beginning, and ugly, painful, necessary, because it reveals who you are when everything is stripped away. The quiet son, the overlooked one, the guy everyone assumed would fold under pressure. And for a while, maybe I believed that too. But when it mattered, when the legacy my father built was on the line, I found a strength I didn't know I had. The kind that shouts, not the kind that seeks revenge. The kind that stands, that listens, that calculates, that fights back, not with fire, but with truth. Mason taught me something, in his own twisted way, that blood doesn't entitle you to loyalty, actions do. And family isn't just who shares your name, it's who honors your name when no one's watching. My father taught me something else, something deeper. That true power lies in restraint, that dignity isn't loud, that real men build, even when it's easier to destroy. And me, I've learned that the quiet ones aren't weak, we're just patient. We watch, we endure, and when the moment comes, we move with precision, with purpose. With something no amount of betrayal can ever take away. Integrity. So if you've ever been pushed aside, underestimated, or stabbed in the back by someone you once called family, let me tell you this: you are not powerless, you are not broken, and you are not alone. What they meant to bury you with might just be the soil you need to grow, because sometimes life burns the bridge not to punish you, but to show you how to walk without it. And when you finally do, you don't just rise, you own the ground they tried to take from you.